So for this part of my tour of my bookshelves, I'll be focusing on my nonfiction books, which out of my main bookcase is the last like 1.5 bookshelves on the right side. So let me just go and get started with that. They are organized by author, ABC order, so I don't really break them down by topic and stuff like that. I'll just touch on a few of these books. I'm not going to highlight every single one. The Sword and the Shield is a really cool book about the kind of the history of the KGB that I really enjoyed. One thing you'll notice, I have a lot of books kind of on political history. My degree is in political science, so always something interesting me. Some of those are actually books from college. Also really into honestly anything history related, so you'll see a wide range of topics here. SPQR by Mary Beard is a very interesting book about the transition from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire. Stalingrad's a very fascinating book about the Battle of Stalingrad during World War II. You have Midnight in Garden of Good and Evil there. Kind of very interesting kind of true crime book. One of my favorite movies also. And you have Alexander Hamilton by Ron Chernow. That is the book the musical is based on, and I'm proud to say I'd actually read that book several years before the musical came out. Hamilton was always one of my founding fathers I found extremely interesting, and when I heard they were doing a musical based on the book, I was like, that's going to be awful. But it turned out it was amazing. Have another Chernow book, Titan, which is his book about John D. Rockefeller. You have kind of one of the more interesting books on this shelf is The Worst Hard Time, a very interesting look at the Great Dust Bowl during the Depression. Very interesting book. The Rise of Athens is a book I read last year about kind of the, as you might expect, the rise of ancient Athens. Next up, The Bully Pulpit is the kind of a really interesting book about Teddy Roosevelt and Taft and their kind of friendship and then rivalry, The Lost City of Z. Very interesting book about exploration in the Amazon. Empire of the Summer Moon is a book about the Comanche. Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking is one of my favorite books. Absolutely love that book. Stonewall Jackson and the American Civil War is a very fascinating book about Stonewall Jackson and his tactics during the Civil War. Is written by a military historian in the not long after the Civil War, so it's very interesting to see their viewpoint on military tactics. But it's a very interesting overview of the Civil War through Stonewall Jackson's campaigns. Johnny Cash, that book is one of the books I read last year. Extremely fascinating look at that musician. Rubicon is another book I have that's kind of about the transition from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire that I really enjoyed a lot. You also see a few local history books. I'm really into local history as well. The area I live in, my family's lived here since the 1840s, so I have kind of a deep connection area. So I've always found local history very fascinating. All right, next up to the next shelf. The Plantagenets, really interesting look about that dynasty in England. The Perfect Storm, great movie, great book. Marching Through Georgia is kind of an interesting look about Sherman's campaign through Georgia during the Civil War. A few books on Martin Luther King's writings. I have a few books about Alexander the Great, kind of scattered throughout my shelves. I always found him very interesting. Eric Larson is one of my favorite nonfiction writers, so I have a few of his books. Of those, my favorite is Devil in the White City. One of the more, I guess, topical books I read recently is Virus Hunters of the CDC, which is kind of a book about how the CDC researches and kind of reacts to new viruses and stuff. It's a lot of the books about Ebola and the AIDS epidemic. But reading it is very eye-opening given what's going on in the world today with COVID. The River of Doubt is a very, very fascinating book about Teddy Roosevelt and kind of post-presidential exploration of a unexplored river in the Amazon. Got some more books that from college that I kept instead of selling back. More college books like Plato. The Warriors of God is a great nonfiction book about the Crusades, specifically about Richard the Lionheart and Saladin and their epic battles. A very interesting book about Napoleon there. Very interesting book about FDR. The Artist, the Philosopher, and the Warrior is a fascinating book. Kind of about the Renaissance in Italy, and it's looking at through the various like very prominent leaders during that time period, I guess you could say is a good way to phrase it. Democracy in America by Tocqueville, staple if you're a political science major, you definitely had to read that book. And that's my nonfiction stuff. If you watched my fiction tour, you already have heard this, but I kind of rotate how I read books. I usually read 2 fiction books, then a nonfiction. 2 fiction, nonfiction helps me keep everything fresh. Found in the past, if I just read, multiple nonfictions in a row, eventually I'd kind of start getting burnt out. Or if I read several fictions in a row, I'd start getting burnt out. So that way it kind of keeps it fresh and keeps me making good progress in reading new books. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video, that tour of my nonfiction books. As always, if you enjoyed it, please like the video. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel. I hope you'll also check out my videos of my tour of my fiction books and my Star Wars books. So again, hope you enjoyed the video. Happy reading, and I'll see you the next time.